everybody. I'm Aaron Simmons. This is Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves, May 1st, 2023. I hope the new month is off to a great start for you. And please go ahead and get subscribed to my YouTube channel and head over to my website, jaaaronsimmons.com, and get subscribed to my monthly newsletter. A new issue went out this morning, and I would love to share it with you. Today, I want to talk about the idea of vulnerability. And this is coming from a friend of mine named Todd May, who wrote a really fantastic book called A Fragile Life, Accepting Our Vulnerability. In that text, what he does is tries to differentiate between two different ways of approaching human existence: vulnerabilism and invulnerabilism. Invulnerabilism is the idea that we are able to overcome our human condition by being unaffected by our finitude, by the termination of our projects, of our dreams, our desires. If these don't work out, we are still the same. This is not something that wrecks us, but it's instead an awareness of how we navigate the world by solidifying our resolve not to be affected. We can find this view in a variety of different philosophical places. He identifies views such as Buddhism and Stoicism as fairly standard examples of invulnerabilist doctrines. Alternatively, we can be vulnerabilist, says Todd, and vulnerability becomes the theme here. And it's not so much that we don't still find some aspects of invulnerabilistic philosophies to be compelling. Sometimes it is important not to be affected or wrecked or crushed by times that things don't work out well. It's important not to be destroyed by disappointment. We've got to protect against disappointment turning into despair. However, what May argues is that vulnerabilism is an embrace of our finitude, not so that we now think it's great that things will sometimes go wrong, that ultimately we're going to die, but that this becomes part of what it means to live on purpose. Accepting this reality is simply what mature adult human existence demands. Now, on this view, this vulnerabilist view, there's good reasons to think that it's in some ways the preferable view, because on the one hand, it allows us to have real investment in relationships that are temporary. For May, what this means is truly loving someone, truly being a friend to someone, requires the sort of finite awareness and recognition that this is not permanent. There's going to be a time where our bodies age, we grow old, we fall out of friendship, things occur that wreck our resolve to be unchanged, and it's important that we be able to grieve. In other words, some suffering that becomes attendant to our finitude is actually part of what it means to benefit from the investment and the relational possibilities of embodied life. Now, this morning, I had an occasion to think about these distinctions that May articulates. I was out mountain biking at Ride Canoga Bike Park in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and there's some gnarly stuff up there. It gets rowdy quick. Even their easy trails are anything but simple. And so I was coming down a trail and leaned into a berm and pushed and pumped hard into it, doing everything I thought the right way. And the next thing I knew, both of my tires slid. I went over, my head went into the ground, my whole left side of the body slid through the dirt. Thankfully, I had lots of pads, I had body armor, I had a full face helmet, so I was fine. But when I got up, I looked back and realized, oh shoot, the reason that my wheels slid out from under me is because I thought I was way up high on the berm, able to pump into it, but I was actually down on the flat ground. So I leaned as if it was a berm, but I wasn't yet into the berm. And somehow I just was mistaken in my awareness of where I was on the bike, on the trail, and it caused a crash. This is actually an example of what vulnerabilism actually invites us to make sense of. Notice, in that wipeout, in that corner, I made a bunch of mistakes. I was at the wrong place. I leaned too far. There were a bunch of cognitive failures that led then to a bad outcome. But it's also the case that the bad outcome is significant, as problematic, as bad, only because I am embodied, because my body breaks down. I'm 45. I'm not 22 anymore. Understanding that our bodies are able to be broken is part of what it looks like to be aware of the condition that defines our existence. So, because of my embodiment, I want to avoid crashing. And because of my ability to make mistakes, that I am vulnerable to error, I did crash. Again, I'm fine. Everything's all right. But that experience highlights what I think is so important about Todd May's defense of vulnerability as something we must accept. Now, by accept, he doesn't mean that we just accept it and move on in this kind of resigned way. It's actually for him a kind of active investment in our vulnerability as a way of then becoming wise and practically smart about when it is that suffering is to be avoided and when suffering is to be embraced as part of the condition of real relationship. It's hard to understand when to draw that line, where exactly to place it. But he gives us two places that I think are actually pretty helpful. He says it's important to understand that part of accepting our vulnerability means being able to differentiate between small matters and large matters. What are those things that really are not a big deal? Can we let those go such that we are not then creating opportunities for suffering when we really should just have been unaffected? And then where are those large matters? Again, the relationships, the personal stakes. Those things really make a difference. And so it's important that we be able to be affected by that. Grief is important as part of love. So differentiating small and large, don't sweat the small stuff, it turns out, is a really important philosophical awareness. And then the second thing he says is we've got to cultivate the right practices and habits of mind in order to be able to navigate our circumstances responsibly. He draws here on a philosopher named Pierre Hadot, who goes back to the Greeks and articulates the idea that philosophy originally was a kind of spiritual exercise. It was a way of caring for our souls, a way of developing ourselves such that we become virtuous, not only in moral life, but also in epistemic life. That we are responsible thinkers because we've made it habitual to think, reflect, engage, be humble, accept criticism. All of these things become part of our practice. We live these things out. And when we do, it allows us to be better at understanding what is small, what is large, what is significant, what can be let go. So today, hopefully you're not wiping out in a corner on a mountain bike trail, but wherever we are, our projects, our desires, our hopes, our dreams often don't turn out the way we had wanted. Sometimes we stub our toe and it hurts. Other times things get even more serious and we lose a loved one or we lose a job and we're unsure how to move forward, how to care for those that we care about. These are large matters and it's important that we be affected by them. Only when we accept our vulnerability, says Todd May, can we begin to do so responsibly? And so I encourage you with this today. A, go higher into the berm and pump so that you don't end up wiping out. That's an important lesson. But secondly, cultivate those spiritual practices. Be philosophical on purpose where you are right now. Reflect, be humble, cultivate kindness, think, act. Do the best you can and recognize that often we're going to do it wrong. But we, thankfully, get opportunities to correct things. Anyway, I hope this is helpful. I am a fan of Todd May's work. I think his notion of vulnerability and vulnerabilism and acceptance of those things is important for us where we are today. And I hope that it helps you wherever you are. I'll see you next time, unless the piano falls on our heads.